Good evening. My name is Logan Roberts. I'm a finance major at UCO, and I'd like to take a few moments to talk to you about consumer debt, the history of consumer debt, how it's impacting many Americans, and possibly how we can reduce your individual consumer debt. As many of you know, one of the greatest financial challenges many Americans face today is managing and paying off the growing burden of consumer debt. According to the quarterly report on household debt and credit issued by the New York Federal Reserve, the total U.S. household debt has soared to more than $18.39 trillion in 2015, reaching the highest levels in recorded history. As college students, we must prepare to manage our own finances. It is essential to understand how consumer credit developed and what factors cause debt to rise, and how these issues may impact each of us in our own personal lives and how it affects the overall economy. The rise in consumer debt in America is driven by easy access to credit, rising social and cultural pressures to spend, and the stagnant wages creating serious long-term financial consequences for the lower and middle class. Understanding this history and its effects can empower individuals to develop healthy financial habits and informed economic choices. In order to understand the current consumer credit crisis, what we first must understand is the history of consumer credit itself. So back in 1908, Henry Ford created the assembly line and the Model T. Both of those things were major advancements in technology that many Americans were new to understanding. And one of the problems is that they were outside the realm of what many Americans can afford. So Henry Ford decided what he was going to do is he's going to set up a saving-based payment plan, which is where every month an individual will come into a bank and deposit $10 to $15 into their savings account. And then once all of the funds were collected, so the $795 were collected, that individual would then receive their automobile. Now, the problem with this is, like many Americans today, the Americans back then didn't want to wait that long in order to get their purchase. So essentially, the savings plan failed. But General Motors, what they did is they started and they introduced the first auto installment loan, which is what many Americans know today. So they would get the automobile and then they would proceed to make monthly payments with some sort of interest rate tacked onto it. By the 1930s, this allowed GM to surpass Ford in overall sales. Following this and the creation of the assembly line, many consumer goods that were no longer previously allowed because it was just too costly in order to develop, were now being introduced into the market, which created large demands for these luxury items. And some of these luxury items were washing machines, refrigerators, furnitures, and even radios. So moving a little bit forward and understanding the success that these consumer loans had, many individuals wanted to be able to access their credit faster and more efficiently. So what they decided to do is they decided to implement credit cards. By the 1950s, multiple versions of the credit card had been created, like the Diners Club card, the American Express card, and the Bank America card. By the 1950s, the Diner Club card was the first credit card that allowed cardholders to make purchases at restaurants, hotels, car rental agencies, and pay their bills in full or at a later date. Users would pay an annual fee of $5, and merchants would pay a 7% fee on all charges. By 1958, American Express created its first charge card, and it was one of the first to issue plastic embossed cards. Also in 1958, Bank of America created their own Bank America card, which allowed revolving monthly balances, and Bank of America card eventually evolved into Visa. As these credit cards grew in popularity, there needed to be a way in order to regulate how consumers and what consumers were more apt to pay back these individual loans. So in 1956, Bill Fair and Earl Isaac founded the Fair Isaac Corporation, also known as FICO, where they developed a credit scoring system that helped standardize a way to calculate a score and categorize it. By the 1960s, thousands of credit bureaus would compile credit reports and issue credit scores. Today, there are only three main bureaus: Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. So after that brief history on the creation of consumer credit loans, consumer credit cards, and consumer credit scores, let's actually talk about why these things are so dangerous and are impacting many Americans. So let's start with consumer credit cards. The total amount of consumer credit currently out there is $1.2 trillion. This is a total increase of $27 billion over the last quarter and $67 billion over the past year. And 12.27% of consumer credit consumers with credit card debt have a balance that is 90 days delinquent. This is very alarming and very concerning for many Americans, and this is why it's becoming a nationwide pandemic. In addition to credit cards, many individuals these days are also taking out student loans, which is becoming very alarming for these individuals as the quantity and the amounts of these student loans are astronomical compared to history's past. Today, the total student loan debt reached $1.6 trillion, which is a $7 billion increase over the previous quarter, but it's a $53 billion increase over the previous year. On top of that, student loans have seen the largest rise in default rates over the last 2 quarters, reaching 10.16% over with individuals that maintain a student loan balance with a 90-day greater delinquency. When discussing consumer credit, one of the long forgotten loans is auto loans. This is very important to understand because it's one of the largest depreciating assets that many Americans purchase inside of their lifetimes. Today, the total amount of auto loan debt is $1.65 trillion, which is a $13 billion increase over the previous quarter, and we saw a $29 billion increase over the previous year. Now, luckily, many Americans are paying off these loans, so the consumer loans or the consumer debt that shows a 90-day delinquency is only 4.9%, which is significantly lower than everything else. But just know that the major impact towards this is just the fact that they are a major depreciating asset, which can cause detrimental harm for many individuals in the long term, especially over the next 3 to 5 years of them owning that particular vehicle. Now, I'm sure most of you are wondering after seeing those astronomical numbers, what can I do? No worries. So there's a few things that we can do in order to alleviate a lot of these debts and just not get them in the first place. But on top of that, many Americans do need to have debt because we just don't have the ability to make these large purchases outright at the beginning. So let's talk a little bit about debt safe practices and then also how to properly pay down these debts. So knowing your personal spending limits is essential because it helps individuals live within their means and make intentional financial decisions. By setting clear boundaries and monthly expenses, people can avoid relying on credit cards for non-essential or impulsive purchases, reducing high interest debt and promoting long-term financial stability. Maintaining a strict monthly budget ensures spending stays within income limits by providing a clear plan on how every dollar is allocated toward necessities, savings, and discretionary expenses. This will eliminate those 90-day delinquencies that we just discussed previously. So now, again, I understand that many Americans may have to go into consumer debt. It's just one of those unavoidable consequences of inflation that we see today. So let's talk about how we can pay down those debts and potentially save you some money in the long run. So one of the most prominent pay down strategies is the avalanche method. So the avalanche method is a debt repayment strategy that focuses on paying debts with the highest interest rates first, while making minimum monthly payments on all other loans. So what this does is many credit is impacted primarily by the high interest rates that credit cards have. So by paying off those 34, 35% interest rates first, you can essentially save thousands of dollars just off of interest payments alone. The next pay down method is known as the snowball method. So many of you may have heard of this due to Dave Ramsey. This is his prominent strategy. So the snowball method is a debt payment strategy that focuses on paying the smaller balances first, regardless of the interest rate, and making minimum monthly payments on all your other loans. The reason this can be effective is because by paying off like that $1,000 credit card over your $10,000 credit card first, is it just lets you feel confident in your abilities to pay down your debts in itself. So by paying off your $500 loan, your $1,000 loan, your $2,000 loan first, you start to build confidence and a better understanding of how your finances work, which will help you in the long term of paying off that $10,000 or $20,000 loan. So in conclusion, the rising consumer debt continues to highlight a systemic problem facing many Americans. As credit card debt, student loan debt, and auto loan debt continue to rise, a shift in consumer culture needs to happen. While credit offers opportunities for convenience and financial growth, unchecked borrowing and societal pressures can lead to overwhelming debt and financial stress. Despite what many financial advisors may say, consumer lending may be necessary for many Americans during economic struggles, but thoughtful planning and structuring can mitigate many of the burdens debt can bring. By understanding the history, causes, and consequences of consumer debt, each of us can take steps towards a more secure financial future and contribute to a healthier and more resilient economy. Everybody, thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, please email me and let me know what those are. Thank you.